Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I hear the Puppy Bowl is on and the Super Bowl. And so I
I
know there's a
think we
lot.
missed the puppy bowl.
Yeah,
How,
that's finished.
how do you mean finished?
The puppy
It's
bowl's
it was
over. Now
on
it's
this
the
afternoon.
afternoon.
I don't know.
Now it's the Super Bowl.
I'm only interested in the Puppy Bowl, even
Me
though I missed
too.
it. The Puppy Bowl. Why watch men crashing into each other when we can watch puppies? That's my question.
Right. And I think there's a kiddie bowl tomorrow.
The sequel.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I would like. I'm a cat person. Go on. I'm sorry.
So, as you might have noticed, Regina is not really present with us tonight. She's
Where is
quite
she?
under the weather.
I'm here in spirit, gang. Here in
She's here in
spirit.
spirit, but not in like video. So we extend our warm feelings to Regina, but she will be sort of on the down low. So I'm afraid not only did you miss Puppy Bowl, but you have me as a sequel. It's going to be a rough night. Maybe we could just watch YouTube videos of puppies for 45 minutes. Or we could talk about anger. Tough choice. But so I'll share my screen, and then we'll do the poem, and then we'll do the verses. I have to say, I find these verses very intense and almost too hard to confront. I think perhaps it's one of the examples where the Buddha used sort of extreme examples to shake up his listeners. We see this on a few occasions. For instance, when he told people that even if there were people that would come with saws and saw you apart, you still should be extending metta to those sawers. And if you weren't really a follower of him. And so we see him using these rather extreme, sometimes gruesome analogies. But I think for the intent of kind of making people wake up, this is important stuff. This is not something to be taken really lightly. And I have to mention on a personal note, something I'll share with you quickly that this morning I was giving a Pali class, and a friend of mine that I've never met, but I have in the class from Myanmar was there. And I called on him to do a few things, and he said, "I'm sorry, I'm not prepared." And I just said, "Okay, whatever," in my normal self-centered way. I wasn't concerned about his well-being. Just maybe annoyed that he didn't really have the work. And later today, I found he had written me an email and apologized for not preparing. But he said, by the way, or not by the way, but as you know, there is a very tough situation in Myanmar right now, and our internet has been shut off, and I've been protesting in the street, but I still want to join your class, and I still plan to prepare for next week. And it's something I found extremely moving, that this young man, at a time where his country is sort of melting down, where it's almost hard for me to imagine his government has essentially just turned off the internet for them for a while, and he's out on the street, that he's still committed to the Dhamma in this way. He's still studying Pali. He's not just kind of angry and doing things. He's still trying to practice, study, learn about Dhamma. And so we have, I'm sure many of you have friends in Myanmar, Burma, even besides me, and we sort of extend our thoughts to those people at this very difficult time for them. It's a very difficult time. And so maybe at the end of the class, we even can do a sort of sharing of the merits if we have a moment for everybody. So let me share my screen. And I hope you can see the poem. And this is a poem by Merwin, who we've had several times. This is one of the last poems he wrote. Towards the end of his life, he stopped using punctuation in his poems, which I think makes it a little bit ambiguous on purpose to read and even to get meaning from. So I'll try my best. It's called Remembering Summer. Being too warm, the old lady said to me, is better than being too cold. I think now in between is the best, because you never give it a thought, but it goes by too fast. I remember the winter, how cold it got. I could never get warm, wherever I was, but I don't remember the summer heat like that. Only the long days, the breathing of the trees, the evenings with the hens still talking in the lane, and the light getting longer in the valley, the sound of a bell from down there somewhere. I can sit here now, still listening to it. So that is our poem, thinking about warmer days, thinking about the past, thinking about how some things make a strong impression and other things seem to make very little impression on us. So let's go now to our sutta. And we'll need, if you can be kind enough, if you'd like to read some verses with us, you can raise your hand. We noticed for some people at least, the hand raising option on your screen has changed. You can find it now in that reactions button on the bottom at the right. There seems to be somewhere there where you can raise your hand to read.
I'll read.
Okay, hang on. So I thought what we could do, because these are verses and they're poetry, that we can maybe look at the Pali just for the sound of it. Because on my screen, I think in this version, this is the translation we have, which is by Bhikkhu Sujato. But on this Sutta Central website, there's a very fancy feature where one can look at the Pali and look at the English side by side. So I thought what we could do, just to kind of sort of have the flavor of Pali and sort of remind ourselves that these are intense verses in meter. I'll try my best to read a couple, and then we can have it read in English. And so maybe I'll read 2 stanzas, and then Sue-Ann can read the same 2 stanzas in English. So I'll try my best. I'm not a meter poetry expert, but I'll try my best to read this for you. And you can follow along in Pali and English together. Tato kayena vachaya, vadang kadvana kodano, koda bibuto puriso, dana janing nigachati, koda sama da samato, ayasyakam nigachati, Nyatimita sudhajacha pare vajanti kodanang. Sue-Ann, would you like to read that now?
Okay, I don't see that, because I only have my tablet. So is it starting with an irritable person?
Yeah, an angry person kills, and just 2 stanzas, yeah.
Okay, fine. An irritable person is ugly, and they sleep badly. When they get what they need, they take it to be what they don't need. An angry person kills with body or speech. Overcome with anger, they lose their wealth.
Okay, I see I skipped one verse in Pali, so let me just backtrack and read that first verse. But thank you, Sue-Ann.
You're welcome.
The first verse in Pali is Kodano dubano hoti ato dukampi seti so ato atanga hetvana, an atang adipajati. Okay, so that's our first two. I'll keep track, and now maybe we can have Duncan read the third and the fourth after I read the Pali. Also, this will be a repeat because I've read it already by accident. Koda samada samato ayas sakyang nigachati nyatimitta sujahacha parivajante kodanang an attajanan no kodo chitta pakopano bya manta rato jatang tangjano nava bujati.
Mad with anger, they fall into disgrace. Relatives, friends, and loved ones avoid an irritable person. Anger creates harm. Anger upsets the mind. That person doesn't recognize the danger that arises within.
Okay, thank you. And so now we slowly become more intense with our verses. I'll read the next two, and then Ken can read the same two in English. And if you'd like to raise your hand, please go ahead going forward. Kudo atang na janati, kudo damang na pasati, andatamang tadahoti, Yankodo sahate narang, Yamkudo uparodeti, Sukarang via dukarang, Pacha so vigate kode, Agi dadova tapati.
An angry person doesn't know the good. An angry person doesn't see the truth. When a person is beset by anger, only blindness is left. An angry person destroys with ease what was hard to build. Afterwards, when the anger is spent, they're tormented as if burnt by fire.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. So here's two more, and we could have Diane follow up. Although I have to say, Diane is becoming quite the polymeter expert. Duman kuyang padaseti, dumang dumiva pavako, yato patayati kodo, yena kujanti manava, nasahiri na otapang, navacho hoti garavo, kodena abibutasa, nadipang hoti kinchanang.
Their look betrays their sulkiness like a fire's smoky plume. And when their anger flares up, they make others angry. They have no conscience or prudence, nor any respectful speech. One overcome by anger has no island refuge anywhere.
Yes, no island refuge anywhere. Okay, here's two more, and we'll have Hui Lin follow in English. Tapaniyami kamani yani damehi araka tani arocha yisami tang sunata yata tatang kudo hi pitarang hanti kudo samatarang kudo hi brahmanang hanti kudo putujanang.
The deeds that torment a man are far from those that are good. I'll explain them now. Listen to this, for it is the truth. An angry person slays their father, their mother too they slay. An angry person slays a saint, a normal person too they slay.
Thank you. Okay. I'll read a couple more. Maybe somebody would like to follow. Yaya matu bhato poso imang lokang ave kati Tampi pana dading santing, hanti kudo putu jano. Atu pamahite sata, atahi paramo pio, hanti kudo putu tanang, nana rupesu muchito. Todd?
A man is raised by his mother, who shows him the world, but an angry, ordinary person slays even that good woman who gave him life. Like oneself, all sentient beings hold themselves most dear, but angry people kill themselves all kinds of ways, distraught for many reasons.
Thank you. Okay, here's a couple more. Asina hanti atanang, visang kadanti muchita, rajuya bhajamiyanti, pabattampi kandare, bunaha chani kamani, atam aranyani cha, karonta nava bujanti, koda jato parabhavo, itayang koda rupena, machu paso guhasayo, tam damena samuchinde, panya virena ditya. Todd, could you read those two as well?
I think you skipped one up above.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
I skipped one. Sorry.
That's all right.
Please read the non-skipped one.
Sure. Some kill themselves with swords. Some, distraught, take poison. Some hang themselves with rope or fling themselves down a mountain gorge. When they commit deeds of destroying life and killing themselves, they don't realize what they do, for anger leads them to ruin. The snare of death in the form of anger lies hidden in the heart. You should cut it out by self-control, by wisdom, energy, and right ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And final two. Yata me tang akusalang samuchinadeta pandito tat eva dame siketa mano dumanang kuyam ahu. Vita koda anasaya, vita loba anusuka, danta kodang pahantvana, pari nibanti anasava. Hui Lin, would you read these last two for us, please? Please?
An astute person should cut out this unskillful thing, and they train in the teaching in just the same way, not yielding to sulkiness. Free of anger, free of despair, free of greed, with no more longing, tamed, having given up anger, they become extinguished without defilements.
Thank you. So maybe we have a kind of happy ending or optimistic ending that there is a way out of this giant mess. So I'm curious for people's takes, people's responses. What did you think? How did you find these verses? Did you find them overly dramatic? Did you find them too intense? Or did you find them something else? Let me know. Who would like to speak?
Stephen,
Yes.
it's Regina.
Oh.
Okay, I'm coming up for a brief thing. I remembered something that I had shared last week that I did want to correct. And Stephen and I, you guys, so we normally talk for several times before we teach, then we talk before, and then right after we'll break down how the class went for a good 30 minutes or so. And in our after class conversation, Stephen had said to me, you know, you told people several times that we're not telling them that they can't get angry. And he's like, but really we are. We are telling people that. And I realized, wow, I was really backtracking. I had this fear of not letting you guys get angry. But you know, the point that I was trying to make was anger will arise in all of us. It's simply inevitable, but not to nourish it, not to nurture it, not to feed into the thoughts. You know, I know that if I get into a verbal altercation, for example, I'll rehash that altercation over and over. Oh, I should have said this. And well, when she said that, I should have come back with this, you know, this type of thing. So I think I just want to make that one correction. We are prey to anger, but we don't, our goal is not to feed it, not to nurture it, and not to crave it. You know, that's a subtle thing that people often don't realize, is that there's a craving for this anger. And I would invite people to look at this and see if this is true for you. And if so, if there is a craving for anger, it must be pleasurable in some way. And so then perhaps inviting you to look at what that might give for you, what that might satisfy. And I'm going to go dark now, have some more water, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Regina. I think maybe if I speak personally, what I find, for instance, the situation in Myanmar, and people are sort of very concerned in their country about things that are happening, and they are acting in, I'm sure many of them are acting in very skillful ways to try to affect the change. And so the word angry in this case maybe is misrepresented, because I think very often, at least in English, when we talk about being angry, we talk about sometimes standing up for what we believe to be right. And certainly, there's nothing here telling us to not do that. But it seems like we've sort of glued that together with the idea of being angry. And so to be angry often means to want to fight for what's right. And so the word anger itself has taken on a lot of different nuances. But I think when we talk about anger in the context of a sutta like this, for instance, we're talking less about skillful behavior, doing good things, not just being passive, being involved in the world, being concerned for the well-being of others, but we're talking about a very unpleasant feeling in the body and acting unkindly towards others. And so we have to maybe be precise about what we mean by anger, because it's not only about, well, if I just sort of isolate myself in a cell in a room somewhere, I won't be angry at the world, and so then I could really practice. And so there's this challenge I find, and I think probably many people do, to sort of know what's happening and also to engage in the world, but to be very mindful, attempt to be mindful of how skillful I am behaving, how wholesome my thoughts are. Are they always generated out of a feeling of kindness and compassion? Or is it sometimes a feeling of resentment and hatred that I just want to crush that person? I wish that person would not even be alive. And so anger has a lot of nuances. And one of the main ways it's addressed, I see here, is about the effect of anger upon the angry one. Because the effect of anger upon somebody else is maybe not even so important, because this is a practice, we could say, somewhat objective, that we're trying to see our own minds clearly. And so that's my sort of 2 cents. And I saw Ken had his hand raised.
Yes, going back to your original question about how we can become addicted to anger, that one of the things I've realized, particularly this year, is that the adrenaline rush that you get when you're angry can become very addictive. And that was something I've been focusing on in my own practice, is to pay attention to that.
Yes, it's a good point because it's sort of like, as you say, it's like an adrenaline rush. And we get it very attached and addicted to wanting to feel revved up or in some way, sort of, wow, I feel amazing now. It's like somebody just sort of injected us with some steroids. And we have to really look at that carefully, I would say. Duncan?
Isn't there a line in the Buddha, one of the Buddha's texts, about anger as an arrow with a honey tip and a poison shaft?
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I think we put that even in an early
yes,
email about
yes.
this. Right.
So that,
A honey tip, but a poisoned shaft. So there's an attractive nature to anger, but it's a toxic kind of thing. And it's hard to see it sometimes because of that honeyed nature. I saw somebody, I think Stephanie, were you about to say something?
Um, yeah, and in part, I think you spoke to it, but I just was thinking about just how, the first line, the angry person, and that's really different than just anger as a emotion that arises as part of, volitional formation. That, as Regina said, we have a choice of how we respond to it. But this seems much more intense to me. He seems to be speaking of somebody that kind of goes through life like this, with sort of that seed of anger and continually watering it. And I just liked your point about kind of, well, when you were talking, what I thought it was just real self-righteousness, like, needing to be right, thinking I'm right. It has to be like this. There's so much attachment in it. And I don't know, when we were reading it, I just felt yuck. Like,
Yeah.
yuck.
Right.
So those were just some thoughts. But I think it's very different than just an emotion arising.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a quality of it's a behavioral quality maybe, and we all probably know people who just tend to be angry people, and we probably all know that we'd rather sort of not be around that person because it's like being around a minefield. We don't know when we're going to set that person off and have another explosion. But I mean, the verses just come out swinging in a sense. The first line, an irritable person or an angry person is ugly. I mean, this is pretty blatant. This is not like, well, we all get angry sometimes. No, the Buddha just tells us an angry person is an ugly person. It's just not a good thing. And then just the next stanza, an angry person kills with speech and bodily actions. So he's equating, in a sense, and in several verses we've seen now, this kind of wrath, this angry behavior with a type of murder, with a type of killing. We're sort of slaughtering the people around us. And what happens? Their relatives, friends, and loved ones. Nyati mita suja. This is the relatives, friends, and suja. That means literally the ones that are close to our heart. Haja. What happens? Everyone moves away. No one wants to be around that person. It's too painful. It's too scary. And so probably, unfortunately, what happens is that person feels resentful because everyone has bailed out on them, because everyone feels like they don't want to be around them, and they feel as if they're being ignored and not properly appreciated. And there's a horrible, vicious cycle that becomes set up. But also, I want to point out, he also says that anger upsets the mind, like the chitta here, but that person doesn't even realize the anger that arises, the danger that arises within. And so there's a sense here of a very strong sense of delusion, which is, of course, one of the three unwholesome roots. We don't even understand what's happening to us. It's like we're living in a fantasy world. We can't tell right from wrong anymore. It's like a haze of fury, okay, or even that's a bit strong, a haze of constant low level irritation. And we don't know when the next flare up is going to come, but we know it's going to come soon. And what happens? You can't tell the good or the truth. We can't tell right from wrong anymore. And this typical Pali canon kind of analogy, there's this blind darkness, undatamang. Like if you're living in the dark, can't see what's happening. So it is not a rave review about the angry person. And of course, it's asking us to look at ourselves. It's not asking us to sort of find out these people in the world. Because I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we can see that we have behaved this way at least a little bit. That the potential to be this way is there for most of us, especially maybe recently. At least in America, there have been a lot of things that have been upsetting, and we can point out to lots of external reasons why, of course, I'm angry. How could I not be? Because of X, Y, and Z. But the verses don't really seem to be giving us a pass on, well, if things are tough, just kind of go for it. You're entitled to be angry. No, it's really telling us the danger, the horror of this anger. And it's talking about fire's smoky plume. So, not a good thing. Jean, did you
Can I
have?
ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead, Sue-Ann. Sorry.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Stephen, but certainly, for the last 4 years, there hasn't been 1 second of one day when there isn't something to get infuriated about. And this is about the demolishment of our democracy. How can you not get angry about that? What am I supposed to do? I'm seriously asking a question. I know I have a temper and I know I get angry over insignificant things, and I'm really trying to rein that in, but won't I be just suppressing my a helpful response to something so ugly as babies in cages or collusion with a foreign government, or the millions of things we could enumerate? I'm really seriously asking then, if the Buddha is saying we can't even acknowledge, acknowledge that I want to kill this guy, and okay, then let it go. Don't do what I do, and call everyone and try to get them to be as aggravated and enraged and outraged as you are. I know that. I'm learning that, but I Regina just clarified before that she was saying anger does arise, but not to cling to it, and I understand that. But now I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I'm thinking you're saying, with all the stuff we have to be angry about, we don't get a pass on it. We don't get entitled to feel our feelings for a minute.
Okay, well, can I respond to that?
Oh yeah, please do.
Okay. I think what I'm trying to say is what's being told in this sutta. I'm really trying not to give my personal opinion. I'm trying to talk about what the Buddha, to the best of my understanding, is teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really not about what I have to say. It's about what the Buddha recommended to us to do. And so I think if we look at this text, which we just read together, he is not saying that we should suppress our anger. I don't see any reference or mention at all in this
Mhm.
entire set of verses about repressing anger.
Mhm.
And so he's talking about the dangers of anger. He's talking about the corrosive nature of anger. He's talking about
Mhm.
what anger does to us. And I noticed that he doesn't ever mention anything about any sort of positive effects of anger, things that it might accomplish for us or anyone else. And I think, as I mentioned earlier in this session, we have to separate out in our minds compassion and concern for other beings with being angry. And so there must be a way, because
Mhm.
certainly the Buddha never told us to not be compassionate, to be uncaring, to not be concerned about anyone else. In fact, he tells
Mhm.
us quite often the opposite. He tells us that we should care for other beings like a mother cares for her own child. And so he
Mhm.
certainly seems to be advocating for kindness and compassion.
Mhm.
And so when he talks about anger, he seems to be separating out the qualities, these wholesome, beautiful, wonderful qualities of kindness and compassion, from a very corrosive and negative quality of anger. And so,
Mhm.
therefore, it seems to me that what he's saying is that it is possible. It might not be easy, it might not be obvious, but it is possible to have concern about things, to perhaps even do our best to change those things we feel are wrong, but to not be angry.
Mhm.
Because as I said, we tend to join the word anger with concern as if they're two parts of one thing. That it's
Right.
impossible not to be angry because how could I not care? But no one is saying here that care and anger are the same thing, that they're two sides of one coin. They are not. They can be separated out, they can be divided apart. And so, therefore, what we've been sort of talking about in the last few sessions is about how to try to see how we feel when we get angry versus perhaps how we feel when we feel loving kindness. And I think we can all even not have
Mhm.
to try too hard to see that they feel very different. And in fact, they're mutually incompatible, that it's really impossible to feel metta and hatred and anger at the same time.
Mhm.
And so I hope that at least begins to answer your question, which is a very valid question, because I hear you saying, I feel strongly about a lot of things. And
Mhm.
how can you tell me to not care? And I answer that I would never say such a thing, and I don't see anything about that. And so, Regina, would you have something to add? Are you there?
Yes, I am. And I just wanted to share one thing, Sue-Ann, when you were talking. I think, most people in America have probably felt at one time or another the way you have, either in this 4 years or the previous, who knows. Um,
Mhm.
but for me, what I think is really important, again, I am, and to echo what Stephen said, is to feel what that feels like in the body. What does that feel like? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And there's, it requires a tremendous amount of self honesty, I think. And secondly, I think watching the news or reading, well, I tend to be a Times reader. So reading the
Mhm.
news, watching the news can be a very dangerous thing. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be informed. I like to be informed. Sometimes when I'm reading the news, it can almost feel like a trauma, when I'm reading about glaciers and India exploding because of warming or extinction. These things are very, very difficult. But so I think it's important. I know I'd spoken a bit ago about being mindful while on the internet, and it's incredibly important to do that. Also, just lastly, I want to say that we humans are very creative and we find many, many ways around dukkha. Dukkha is not fun. Dukkha is not pleasant. And it's much more pleasant to be angry, I would suggest. And so I just want to offer that up as a point of exploration. And again, to second that suppression is not on the table, but feeling what's really there rather than what we may think is there. So I'm just going to leave it there because I know a lot of people had their hands raised. Thank you for letting me share, everyone.
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
may I just say thank you, Stephen? And I really did not mean to imply that you were forcing your opinion on anyone. I know you were explaining the sutta, and you're right. I do have that kind of glued connection that if something is so outrageous, I can be concerned, and I act and I do all the actions I can take, whether it be about the environment or animals or the political situation or whatever. But I don't have to see it necessarily follows with me that I get insanely angry and it feels terrible in my body, and it makes me lose friends, and people don't want to be around me, and they tell me that they can't stand it when I get so insane about things. So of course I know that's not a good thing, and thank you for explaining it, both of you. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry I took up so much time. Thank you.
It's okay. And I would just point you to the last 3 stanzas of this poem, which I think is a really good set of tips or instructions of how to work with it, how to help. It's not just sort of like, don't be angry. It says that we should have self-control, and we should imply these great qualities: wisdom, energy, right ideas or right view, and we should cut it out, right? Cut it out.
Right.
It doesn't say, well, it's okay. So
Yeah.
I just would say, give it a whirl. See how it feels if you try to work with things.
Okay. Thank you so much, both. I appreciate it.
Carolyn, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to suggest it's an excellent book on how to work with the anger, and really goes deep into what anger is and what it does to us, etc. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's entitled Anger. And it's a very big seller because this is a big problem with everyone. But the book is very clear and gives skillful ways how to work with your anger, how to make it smaller and smaller, and not to keep watering it.
Thank
So
you.
I just
That's a
wanted
great
to
suggestion. Okay. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken who would like to contribute something?
Yeah, I'd like to say something real quick.
Please.
In responding to Sue Ann, I'm sorry, Sue Ann or Suzanne, I forget. But I think for me, I notice when I get angry, it's because I'm totally blind to the idea that I'm not aware that I'm so tied to myself, to my sense of self, and to my identity, my views, the points of view that I'm holding as justified. And believe me, I understand I think I understand what is upsetting you, but it's definitely at that point, it's a matter of, it's affecting me. I'm the one not letting go at that point. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anybody else? We have 1 or 2 more minutes. Otherwise, we can sharing of merits.
Thank you for the poly. It's really first time in a poem like this. That was great, and also the poem about an old woman remembering summer. And I was imagining this angry person that's being described in the Sutta. What kind of poem could they write about the summer? How have they missed?
You're welcome. Maybe we'll do a very quick sharing of the merits. We can do it in Pali. I'll share my screen. And if you would like to chant along, you can do that, or you can read the English. And so I'd like to dedicate these merits today for our friends in Myanmar. I also would like to dedicate it to the memory of my mother, who has died now 1 month ago. And so this is a kind of traditional Pali sharing of the merits. Akasata cha bhumata deva naga mahidika punyang tang adumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang akasata cha bhumata deva naga mahidika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cham amhehi sambhatam punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cham amhehi sambhadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Bhavagupadaya avici hetato et antere satakai upapana rupya rupicha asanya sanino duka pumachantu pusantu nibuting.
Sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. And feel better, Regina, if you're on.
Okay.
Feel better.
Yeah.
We'll see you Thursday.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks,
Yes.
Stephen. That was
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Good night,
much.
everybody. Blessings
Good
to
night.
everyone.
Good week.
Bye.
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 Bye.